All right, so go for it.
Yeah, no, we just yeah, you go ahead, Karen. We just wanted to have an interview with you
Yeah,
because we
I
thought
mean,
we thought
I
you were
have
interesting.
no idea what you want to talk about outside of all Ohm has told me is we want to talk about your life.
yeah. Well,
Okay.
in that vein, would you mind introducing yourself and just tell us about your time?
Sure. Um, that's always a complicated question. Who are you? I don't know. Who am I? Uh, all right. So huh. I grew up in a very liberal arts household. My parents were professors. My mother taught medieval literature, and my father taught world history, but his specialty was 18th century parliamentary British history.
Ooh,
And my stepfather was an anthropologist who studied tribal traditions in Western Africa.
What?
So, yeah, I grew up in that kind of a house.
Nice.
Um, I wanted to be a musician and a writer when I was a kid. And graduating high school, that's what I decided I would go do. And so I went off into theater and music professionally for about 8 years, and then had a crisis, and because of childhood trauma, and decided to completely switch careers. And this is sort of a pattern in my life. My life has a tendency to burn itself to the ground, and I mean scorched earth repeatedly. Yeah. I was
That's me too. That's me too.
like, me
yeah,
too.
yeah. Quite a Sam.
Um, Generally I achieve a certain level of success in what I'm doing, and then I can't seem to get past that barrier. And then everything gets burned to the ground. I mean, uh, my friends are gone, my relationships are gone, my job is gone all at the same time. Usually I lose a parent around the same time. And um, it's sort of life destroying. But out of the ashes of that, I end up getting reborn, usually fairly quickly. And then I start at a much higher level and I go up from there until I reach another plateau. And then my life gets destroyed again. And so at 24, when I left music and theater, I got redirected into technology. It wasn't where I wanted to go. I wanted to go into film. So naturally, life took me into tech because, as you do. And and I was sort of guided along a path of engineering and products and how companies are built and how products are built. And a lot of that involved a lot of coaching. Either I was mentoring my employees or I was sort of coaching them into higher level positions, or I was coaching other leaders who had less experience than I did, or who found it difficult to fire somebody or difficult to empower their teams. And then I went from that, and that was very fulfilling. I really liked making people better, you know. Um, I found after a while, I stopped focusing on what I could do to be great and realized that I had a much bigger impact if I could take other people and turn them into rock stars, you know?
Mm.
And so that would generally be my speech when I would take over a new team, is I would say, my mission here is to turn you into a rock star. That's my job. So it's going to be about making sure that you're on the right path for you, that you have a future, that you're thinking about your future career, and that I want you to think beyond this job. Because there are things that I can do in this job to make you awesome for your next job. And that's what I want you to think about, because I am under no illusions that you will be here forever. If you're here forever, I'm going to kick you out because that's just wrong. You know, you got to grow, man. Um, and so I sort of made that my mission
That's great.
when I would come into a new job. And then that led to sort of the realization that management is really parenting, and that a manager or any leader, it should be doing all the things that you would expect a parent would do, meaning they care about the future of their employees. They set them up for success, not failure. They forgive their mistakes because we make mistakes so long as you're accountable for your mistakes, right? The worst thing that you could do on one of my teams is make a mistake and refuse to admit it or refuse to take accountability for it. I don't care how bad it is. You could screw up monumentally so long as you can come to me, tell me that it happened, take ownership of it, and then I'll help clean it up, and I won't blame you. I won't, get angry at you. I won't, I mean, if you do something wrong, I will absolutely tell you, and I will tell you in no uncertain terms that you've done screwed up. But it was very important to me that my staff understand that even if I get angry at them, even if I yell at them over something they did, I will still love them afterwards. It's not going to change anything. Will I expect them to clean up their mistake? Absolutely. Will I expect them to do everything they can to make sure it doesn't happen again? Absolutely. Because if they don't do that, then why would I keep employing them? And they know that I would fire them. They know I would fire them. I have no qualms about firing somebody, even if I love them. If this is not the right place for them, or if they're bringing the rest of the team down, I have an obligation to the team to remove people who are making the team worse. But that doesn't mean that I can't fire somebody with compassion, and generally if I'm going to fire somebody, they know, because, they've heard from me repeatedly that they're messing up, and they know they're messing up, and they know the hammer's going to fall, I usually give them plenty of warning. So when it happens, no one is surprised, which makes those conversations much easier. But it's all about, being transparent and treating them as you would your children. Your children want all the same things. They want to know how you feel. They want you to be honest. They want you to look after them. They want you to care for them. They want you to make them better if you can, or at least give them opportunities to be better. If they screw up, they expect to be disciplined. If somebody else screws up, they expect that person to be disciplined because they expect the rules are the rules. And there's no exceptions, no favorites. And that you'll love them no matter what. They expect all these things. And so I was realizing that a lot of managers were not doing this. That for some reason, there's this thought that I can't be friends with my employees. That's just wrong. I'm the boss. I have to be in charge. Can you imagine a parent saying, I can't be friends with my kids? I have to be strict and just distant and cold with them because that's the only way to be. That's ridiculous. Do you think your kids forget that you're their mom? No. They might think, oh, mom's a pushover. I can get away with murder. But that doesn't mean they don't think that you're the mom or the dad, So long as they're clear that there are rules, so long as they're clear that you're not going to hold back from punishing them if they do something wrong, but that you're still going to love them afterwards, then everything's great. You can have an amazing relationship with them, really gear them up to have an awesome career. There's all this trust and honesty, and no one's trying to lie to you or go behind your back or hide things. God, it's so much easier to manage a team like that, you know? But it requires it requires that the manager take a different attitude. It's not servant leadership. It's not top-down dictatorial, do as I say and shut up. It's a more practical approach. And that actually helped me realize that what I'm actually doing is I'm simply loving them no matter what happens, and I'm giving them unconditional support. I accept you the way that you are. I will tell you what needs to change if there's something that needs to change, but it's not going to be because I don't personally like how you are. It's always going to be because you're having a negative influence on the team, or you're having a negative influence on your work. This must change because otherwise the work's not getting done the right way, or this must change because otherwise the team is suffering. So yeah.
I was just gonna ask, okay, so you were doing this managing, and then is that what you're still doing, managing people? Is that your main thing? But also I wanted to say, like, we can edit this conversation, so anything you don't feel comfortable sharing,
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
we can edit out. And
oh,
then
you
also,
know by now that I am comfortable sharing everything.
yeah, okay, that's pretty much what I thought. And
I
so,
have no line in the sand, you know?
yeah, fair enough. And so, yeah, I mean, part of it is I was hoping you would share a bit about your spiritual journey as well, and where you're at with all of that. Um,
Sure.
but yeah, mainly we just, yeah, kind of want to know more, yeah, about your journey.
Okay.
And
So
so, okay,
I'll catch up on the spiritual journey in a minute.
yeah, no
Uh,
worries.
so uh, everything in my life I realize now has been about managing people.
Mm,
Um, because I went from managing teams and empowering teams and realizing that it was unconditional love and acceptance that made it work, right? It was parenting that made it work, and parenting is about unconditional love and acceptance and support.
cool.
The only thing that I can do as a manager that I would never do as a parent is get rid of somebody. You know, you can't, much as parents may have threatened this when you were a kid, you can't actually, you know, that's it, I'm going to shove you back in and that'll
Well,
be it.
yeah.
I can kill you and make another one. You know, it's not, that's not quite how it works. But in an organization, yeah, you could say this person is simply not a good fit for this team. You know, either they've got too many ego issues, or they've got, you know, whatever it is, they're just not right for this team. This team is collaborative, this person is not. This team is very optimistic, this person is not. Whatever it is that makes them a difficult fit, they probably feel it just as much as everyone else does. At a certain point, it's the manager's job to pull the plug and say, okay, this isn't working. Um, Most managers hide from that responsibility, unfortunately. They hope it will resolve itself, you know. Maybe if I can make this person uncomfortable enough, they'll just quit. Oh my God. um, you're the leader, for crying out loud. Anyway, um, so then I went into entrepreneurship and discovered there were a lot of problems with entrepreneurs getting the kind of help that they needed. And in the course of trying to provide that kind of expertise and help and facilities for idea stage entrepreneurs, I found once again that what was needed most was parenting, is coaching. It was unconditional love and acceptance. You know, being willing to listen when they're suffering and struggling, and yeah, sure, providing expertise, but half the challenge is just letting them vent, letting them rant, telling them when they're being perhaps a little myopic, or when they're, you know, when the problem is not what's going on, the problem is how they're taking what's going on. Um, and in the course of it, I started to deal with um, people's levels of anxiety and stress over things they felt they couldn't control. And so here's where we get into my spiritual journey. Um, when I left music and theater, it was because I could not live with the idea that my success would depend on me, because
That's
I found
interesting.
I had very little control over my life. And really, I didn't have the faith in myself that I needed to even be able to get out of bed in the morning sometimes. And I loved being on stage, but it's a very, you know, pursuing art of any kind is punishing to the soul in a lot of ways, because you either have to have supreme levels of self-esteem, such that it doesn't matter what people say about your art. You know, you can just white knuckle it and go forward anyway. Or you have to have such slavish dedication, such a passion for what you're doing, that you have no choice but to go forward. But I suspect a lot of those artists end up killing themselves, because if you feel compelled to walk a road that is destroying your soul, that only ends in one place, you know? And that's the road that I was on. I felt
Mm.
compelled to do this. And I loved being on stage, but it was destroying me. My childhood had not prepared me um, which is an understatement. My childhood was filled with trauma and abuse. Um, physical abuse and emotional abuse, intellectual abuse, verbal abuse. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of abuse, and the physical abuse was the least of it. Um, so when people talk to me about abuse, they often only refer to sexual abuse or physical abuse as the only two visible forms of abuse. When somebody's emotionally abusing you, verbally abusing you, intellectually abusing you, it's invisible. And those people can come across as perfectly rational, lovely people, even when they're abusing you.
Yeah.
Depends on how skillful they are. And, and for me, it's difficult to quantify the damage that was done. Um, Another problem, of course, is that when you're in the middle of it, you don't see it, you don't recognize it for what it is. But I ended up seeing it through the eyes of some outside observers once in a while, and they were truly horrified at things that I kind of took for granted. Oh yeah, well that's Tuesday. It's a day ending in Y. Um, but I left home at 17 because I was rescued, not because I walked out. I wasn't smart enough to walk out. Um,
Wow.
but yeah, my girlfriend at the time told me I was never going back, after one particularly nasty episode that she witnessed, the first time that she ever, met my stepfather. And she was truly horrified. I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was that bad. I had to see it through her eyes to recognize, oh yeah, I guess it really is pretty bad. And even then, it took me decades to really understand. Um, so I was the least prepared to be able to pursue art and believe in myself, you know. So at 24, I'd been suicidal for at least 10 years, probably more. One of those kids who had a plan of how he was going to kill himself when the time came. I'd worked that out. I worked that
Wow.
out at 15. Um, I just never pulled the trigger, pardon the expression. I never pulled the trigger on that plan. Um, so at 24, I did realize, however, that I was unhappy. I was never going to be happy, and that if I was responsible for my own success, then I might as well just pull the trigger on that plan and be done with it. Because I was never going to succeed. That was my conviction. I was just too I would have said I just not skilled enough. I don't have enough talent to succeed, and I don't have enough adulting ability, to and uh, and I realized it just wasn't tenable to keep doing this. So I decided to quit music and theater, and I had no plan B, none. My parents had plans for my career, but I didn't follow either of their ideas. Um, I always went my own way. And so I went, I thought, well, I'll pick up the book I was writing in high school, and I thought I'd write a book. And I was doing that for about 6 months, trying to figure out how I was going to live my life. What was I going to do now if I wasn't going to do music and theater? And and something occurred to me at that time, which was, and this is quite literally the order in which the thoughts occurred to me. The first thing I realized was I can't believe in myself. It's not possible. I've tried. I don't see a way to do it. So I need to believe in something because I can't believe in me, but I'm not a religious person, never have been. My parents were religious in their own way, but at age 4, they stopped trying to get us to indoctrinate us into religion because they divorced, and my mother decided that the problem with the marriage was the church. and And so she kept her religious beliefs to herself after that. She taught us all about the Bible, and because that's the foundation of Western literature, she's a literature professor. So naturally, she's going to make
Mm.
sure you have the foundation of Western literature under your belt. But she wasn't taking us to church anymore. She wasn't trying to, indoctrinate us into the church. She wanted us to make up our own minds. So at 24, I knew I didn't believe in God. That just wasn't a thing for me. And I wasn't about to start. So, okay, so I can't believe in myself. I can't believe in God. What the hell am I supposed to believe in? I knew about the 12-step programs, surrender yourself to a higher power. This is sort of where I had the idea that maybe maybe I have to find some way to do that. And while I was trying to puzzle this out, um, I was examining my life and realizing that every time that I tried to steer the direction of my life, it was an unmitigated disaster. It would start out well. It's like you're in a car, you're on a highway, and you're driving down. Everything's great. Look at the scenery, it's awesome. And this 4-lane highway starts turning into a 2-lane highway, and then there are dark clouds that start moving in, and then there are suddenly the road conditions are not so great. And then there's these large cratering potholes in the road, and you're swerving around those. And then there's like, how did this tree get in the way? And you're swerving around that. And then there's boulders coming down, and you're running around that. And then it starts to rain. You're like, what the hell is going on? Like, why does this keep getting harder and harder? Forward momentum just starts to slow down, and it almost feels like life is, hitting you in the face repeatedly, like sort of light body jabs, and then maybe a slap in the face, and then maybe a punch in the face, and then maybe a couple of punches to the head, and you're just I'm gonna go forward because this is how you get through life. You pick a goal, you drive forward, and that's how. But the harder I'm pushing forward, the more the road is pushing back. Um, and it feels like every step I'm trying to take gets harder and harder. And the way I described it at the time to myself is it's rather like life is just beating me to a pulp and enjoying it, you know? Um, it's a little bit as though uh, life wants me to stop pursuing this path, and it doesn't have a good way to tell me outside of beating the crap out of me. Um, And this was sort of my problem with believing in God, because I say life because if this was God, uh, then man, he's a vicious bastard. It didn't seem likely to me that a supreme being would be like this. It felt much more like I was dealing with a force of nature, um, rather like just pushing against an invisible force that was not going to relent. This wasn't a question of, the harder if you push hard enough, you'll break through. No, 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 no. This was much more like, sort of, what's that condensate when you take water and you take baking powder and you mix it together and you get to this pressure sensitive liquid.
Oh
But
yeah.
the harder you hit it, the more solid it is, right?
Non-Newtonian fluid.
There you go. I want to say Einsteinian fluid, and I knew that was wrong. Yeah, so a
Yeah.
non-Newtonian fluid. So it felt very much like this. The more you force, the more it resists.
Have you ever heard the saying, Jonathan, God forgives, but nature doesn't?
Yeah. Oh no, nature has no particular empathy for you whatsoever.
That's what it
And
reminds
that
me of.
and that matched my experience exactly. If you didn't say that God was responsible for this, if you simply said this is nature, that's exactly what it feels like. It doesn't feel like there's any compassion involved in this. There's no, goodwill or ill will involved. It's simply this direction is easy and this direction is hard. And this direction will be harder and harder because it's the wrong one. So my point is I could see that that was the case. I could also see that every time I took my hands off the wheel and let the car drive itself, it would get off the road that I was on. It would take a side road, it would take the next exit, and it would meander off through the countryside, and it would wind up in a place that I hadn't thought about that was much better for me. And that road was easy. It meandered, but it was easy. things just kind of flowed nicely when I would let that happen. And so I sat there at 24, scratching my head, going, wait a minute. Does this mean that I have to live my life taking my hands off the wheel and just let the car go wherever it wanted? My first concern was what people would say if I told them that this was my strategy. I expected to be roundly criticized. And
And you figure this out at 24?
At 24, yeah, this became obvious to me.
Karen, is your audio muted?
I don't think
No?
so.
Okay.
Is it?
No, it's not.
I want to be quiet. I don't want to interrupt.
No, you can interrupt anytime.
Feel free to interrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, at 24, I was very introspective. I'd already been in therapy for 4 or 5 years by that time. Therapy did nothing for me. It has never done anything for me. Um, I mean, therapy taught me a lot about asking the right questions, but I never had a single breakthrough in therapy.
I unfortunately feel like, and I hesitate to say this because there are great therapists, but the majority of therapy is like it tells you what the problem is with your car and how you broke it, but it doesn't tell you how to fix it.
Well, ironically, I was having a conversation about this with somebody else today.
Oh.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with therapy. I would strongly recommend that everyone experience therapy at one point or another in their lives, because it does force you to look at yourself and teach you how to look at yourself in a more objective way. At the very least, it teaches you that everything that you think is true is not necessarily true,
Yeah.
and that there are biases that influence you, and they're all predicated on past trauma. Um, so I think that's an important realization for somebody to have,
Yeah,
to
for
be
sure.
able to say, what I believe is not necessarily the truth. It is simply the sum total of my experiences, including all of my fears and my trauma, that's coloring my perspective. And when you're examining what you believe to be true, it's important to have that in your head, that you have to take that into account. And that somebody else is not necessarily wrong. They're just approaching the issue from a very different perspective. And that your truth and their truth are not going to be the same. And the truth makes no difference at all, right? It is never about the truth. It's only about what you think is true and what I think is true, and how are we going to bridge the gap, and I find far too many arguments try to get down to the truth. And I'm just as guilty as anybody else about caring about what the actual objective truth is. And sometimes it's useful, but many times it's not. Arguing over that doesn't matter. You're just wasting time.
Mm.
Um, I feel I digressed.
That's okay. No, that's
So
cool.
at 24, this was my thought process. And so I decided that I was going to live my life taking my hands off the wheel. And that led me to a sort of a growing belief that life is really about just letting your life take you where it wants to take you. That if you that that life is not, it's not that life has an intelligence to it. I wouldn't say that. Um, because then you'd start to argue about whether it's a malevolent intelligence or a benevolent intelligence, which I think doesn't go to the point of it. The point of it is that life has a destination it's trying to take you towards, and it will take you there kicking and screaming if it must, but it will take you there. You don't have to cooperate. Good luck with that. It's not going to work. When people feel that their life is going in circles, when they feel that they're working harder and harder and getting less and less progress out of life, it's largely because they're not focused in the right direction. Their life is going this way and they're trying to go that way, and that's not going to work. So I rapidly came up with a metaphor that was not so much the self-driving car as it was, imagine that you are floating on a river in a kayak, and It's a very large river. It's a very powerful river, but it's very slow moving. The current is not easy to feel. It's pitch black. You cannot see which way you're drifting. So you can only know by, remaining silent and still and feeling which way the current is going, because you can either paddle with the current or you can paddle against it at, varying angles. If you paddle 180 degrees in the opposite direction, wow, you're going to sit still. You forward progress is going to feel like one step forward, three steps back, or one step forward, one step back if you're lucky. But you're going nowhere, man. If you paddle at varying angles to it, you'll have different levels of success in what you believe is forward motion. But you're also probably headed off to the side. You'll end up in a backwater. You'll end up in an eddy, just spinning in circles and wondering why you can't seem to make forward momentum. Yeah, because you're stuck in a backwash. Why? Because you're not paddling with the current. And if you paddle with the current, then things are going to be really smooth and really easy. And like water, if you stay with the current and flow with it, then you'll flow around the rocks, over the rocks. The rocks won't be a problem. If you don't paddle with the flow, if you're turbulent with it, then you'll smash against the rocks, and that'll be fun. You'll still go forward, but it'll be painful. So it's all about, at that time, I felt it's all about really, literally going with the flow and letting the river take you wherever it's going to take you. Now, the problem with that metaphor was that rivers only go to one place. They all go to the ocean, right? That's ultimately where water wants to go. Who said I want to go to the ocean? And who said I wanted to go to that ocean? And so I wrestled with the natural consequence of this belief, which was, wait a minute, this is destiny. Am I honestly going to submit to destiny, fate? And that seemed wrong to me. I mean, the theory was correct in practice, but the ultimate conclusion seemed wrong. It didn't feel right to me. So I wrestled with that for a while. But all the way through my 30s, into my 40s, what I discovered was that it's very hard to hear your inner voice tell you what choices to make. Because in order to flow with the river, what this is really about is saying, at any given moment, I face a raft of different choices that I can make. And some of them seem crazy. Some of them seem really scary. And some of them seem much easier and simple. The simple choices are almost never right. The scary and crazy choices are usually the ones that I'm supposed to take. And I discovered that it took a long time for me to tune into that intuitive voice inside of you, your gut that says, this is the right thing to do. Because right away, my logical brain or my fear, which are kind of the same, would take over and go, no, that's crazy. What are people going to say? I mean, you're going to do this. You're going to give up your job. You're going to drop this relationship. You're going to, oh my God, what are you doing? And you sort of have that voice of your critics in your head, usually many of them, your parents and friends and your boss and whoever else you look up to, who are all trying to talk you out of it. And really, it's your inner fear trying to convince you not to do what you know you should do, mostly by highlighting the obstacles, highlighting the risks. Fear wants to avoid change. Fear wants you to just stay the way you are. Zero change is awesome. Let's just continue on the path that we're on. The devil, well, that's an argument that fear makes.
Yep.
And I say logic and fear are the same simply because logic is awesome. It's great. Fantastic analytical tool. Terrible for decision making. Terrible. It'll measure out the pros and cons are nice to know. because they're the consequences of taking a path. But pros and cons are simply facts. Ideally, they're facts. They're not opinion-based. Hopefully no one's using logic to determine opinion. But facts are just that. They're just facts. They're neither good nor bad. Put in the hands of the right person, they can be used to prove innocence or guilt in a court of law. They can be used. I've had facts twisted on me all the time. That's a large part of the gaslighting I went through as a kid. A large part of the manipulation and the abuse I went through as a child was having facts twisted on me. So if you think of it this way, your intuition knows the right choice without question. It knows it immediately, right? Anyone who's walked into a workplace on day one and just knows that this is going to be an awesome job, or knows that I'm getting a bad vibe here. Anyone who has gone on a date and just knew right away that they say, oh, we just clicked. Well, what the hell is that? That's your intuition saying this person is right for me, right? This is going to be I don't know if it's going to be a friendship or something romantic, but there's something here and it's working from instant one, right? Or the feeling that you walk into an apartment and you just know it's the right one. You're ready to sign the contract immediately, even though you haven't even seen the whole place, right? We talk about, oh, it's the energy of the place, or it's the vibe of the place. All right, that's your intuitive voice going, yes, this is it, right? Does it require logic or facts? No, it simply knows. So who is it that requires the logic? It's your fear. Your fear needs the logic because your fear has to convince you of something that you don't normally want to do. You know the right thing to do. It's got to convince you not to do it. So how's it going to do that? Because you intuitively know that this thing is right. So it's got to bring a lot of logic into the argument to try and convince you not to do that thing. Logic is not a tool for decision making. It's a tool for not making the right decision. Again, pros and cons are awesome. It's important to walk into any choice with your eyes open. Don't use it to make decisions. That is the one thing that I learned from 24 to age, say 45. This became really clear to me that it wasn't just about using intuition to make the right choice. It was about accepting the choice regardless of what it means. And ultimately, that is the only difficult thing about walking your path, it's about submitting to the choice, accepting that you will do this and committing to it with both feet. It's not enough to simply say, okay, yeah, I'll do this, and then hold back. You have to do it and commit to it, put both feet on that path, and then life takes over and clears out your obstacles and does everything else. So I was sort of stuck with this metaphor of the river until my 40s. And in my 40s, I actually got recorded on YouTube talking about this theory of mine, that life is a river, for an event, for a Ignite Montreal event. And they recorded all the presentations. So that's memorialized in YouTube somewhere. And so that I'm constantly evolving this thought in my head about how does this work? How does this work? And the thing that always bothered me was this question of the destination, because it just didn't strike me as natural that life knows from birth which direction you're headed in. And the thing that really bothered me was that it didn't answer this question of why is it that women will go from one abusive relationship to another. So will men. Men will do the same thing. If they end up with a dominating, controlling girlfriend, they'll find another one, then they'll find another one, then they'll marry one. And you could argue, well, they're reliving a trauma from their past. Absolutely. People usually end up with abusers because they've been abused in the past. But that doesn't explain how they end up with another abuser, even though They know that the previous relationship was abusive. They don't want that anymore. And the next person they run into is an abuser. And we will say, well, it's because they're giving off this vibe of victim. No, they're not. I'm sorry. No, I don't believe that. Oh, well, it's because they're consciously choosing an abuser. Nope, the guy gave no red flags. I don't believe that either. And it's kind of insulting to the victim to say, well, you did this to yourself, They absolutely did not want to be abused. um, and so I was struggling to explain all these things, or you could sort of ask it in the age-old question, why do good things happen to bad people and why do bad things happen to good people? What I realized was that we set our own destination. And this sort of came from the question, where does intuition actually come from? Like, I'm following my intuition, but how does it know? How does my intuition know that this choice, which seems completely random and obscure and not aligned with where I want to go at all, how does it know that this is the right choice for me to make? The only answer to that is that it can see ahead. It's the only way it can possibly know. How could it possibly see ahead? And so thinking through this, like I've been fascinated with physics and science my whole life. It's been kind of weird. I learned astrology when I was 12, and I learned tarot cards when I was 16. And at the same time, I'm studying, science and physics. I've always been that weird kid. And it always seemed to me that these two things were not so misaligned as they seemed to be at that time. And then as I got further and further into quantum mechanics, I started to see a lot of similarities with Eastern thought, and so I started to apply these principles, which I've always been hugely fanatical about, to this question of where does intuition come from? So I'm sorry, I'm going to do a deep dive, and I apologize.
No, let's go. It's all good.
Yeah, it's all good. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So in quantum mechanics, there's this notion of multi-world theory, in which every moment that you're living through, um, anytime that you face a choice, um, there are different realities that are spun off from every choice, right? So this comes from the double slit experiment for photons of light, where they send a photon of light towards a wall that registers where the photon hits. And if they just send a scattering of photons towards this wall, you get what you would expect, sort of a circular pattern of dots with a concentration in the center. So then you put a barrier in front of that, and you put a slit in front of in the barrier, and there's only one way through the barrier, and that's through the slit. And you repeat the experiment, and now instead of getting a circle, you get a line, a horizontal line, and more concentrated in the center and sort of spreading out on either side. Well, now you put two slits, and you would think, because up until now, photons look like particles, right? They're hitting with specific dots. So you would think, well, what I'm going to see here is I'm going to see two bars, right? That's not what you get. What you get is what they call an interference pattern. You get multiple bars of sort of lighter and darker, and you get the spread, but it's as though the light has suddenly become a wave, and it's entered both slits, and it's spreading out on either side of both slits, and where the waves and troughs line up, you get brighter and darker lines. You see this on the floor of a pool all the time. But that makes no sense. And this raised the question, which had been plaguing scientists for about 100 years by that time: is light a wave or a particle? Because it doesn't seem to be either one, it seems to be both. And so they designed this experiment to try and answer the question. And the minute they put the two slits in there and it started to behave like a wave, they went, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. No, 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 that's crazy. So let's try and resolve this. Why don't we put a detector at the barrier and we'll try and figure out which slot the photon's going through, because it can't go through both. Well, the minute they put a detector, you got two bars, which means the minute you put a detector, it becomes a particle and it stops behaving like a wave. But when you take the detector away, it becomes a wave. And what this led to was the quantum mechanical theory that matter is in a state of flux until it is observed. And philosophers went bananas because this is my sister studied philosophy, and I got exposed to that when I was 12 with her trying to prove to me that I didn't exist. And one of the questions she used to pose to me was, how do you know that just before you turn the corner of the street, that there's anything there at all? How do you know it's not being filled in as you turn the corner of the street?
Correct.
Kind of like a video game.
Yeah.
And of course, you can't answer that question. It's almost impossible to answer it. Because to answer it, you'd have to be around the corner. But the minute you're around the corner, you're observing. So of course, reality fills in. Like, how do you prove that reality is still there when you're not there to observe it? And quantum mechanics was now saying, actually, if you're not there to observe it, it is kind of in a state of flux. It doesn't actually know what's going on. And scientists could not resolve this sort of micro concept with the macro world of what, but this table is here. And if I turn around and leave the room, it's still here. So it remained this fascinating idea. Schrodinger, in an attempt to sort of poop on the whole idea, came up with this idea of a cat that is both alive and dead, or in this uncertain state of being alive or dead until you open the box and check. And only then does the cat suddenly become alive or dead. And he said, this is how ridiculous this idea is. And yet his lampooning of the theory is the one thing that everyone remembers about, how to prove or how to explain the theory. It's kind of ironic.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I know.
Have you ever heard of Howdy Mikowski?
No.
So he's a very fascinating guy, but he nearly died basically in a river. Funny you're speaking about a river, but he nearly drowned to death, and he had this near-death experience, and then he spent the next whatever number of years trying to figure out what's real and what isn't. And he basically got to a point where reality started to break down in front of him, where if he didn't think a wall was there, the wall wouldn't be there. These kinds of things.
Yeah, well, that is very much
whether
how.
it's real, whether he's actually being honest, I don't know, but that's what he claims. So it's quite interesting.
So that idea greatly appeals to me because everything that I've learned has suggested that guy has a certain mastery that we don't have, right? I believe very much that the reality that we live in is something that we've learned how to see, we've learned how to perceive it as babies, because the first thing that we do coming out of the womb is we try and orient ourselves into the same reality as our parents and the people around us. But a quantum scientist would say, well, we're all experiencing our own version of this reality, and we're collaborating on, what the truth is, which is why eyewitness reports are notoriously bad. Partially because we have a lot of change blindness. Your eyes take in trillions upon trillions of bits of information, but your brain only retains the stuff that seems relevant, and it throws the rest away. Because otherwise you'd be overwhelmed. But I also think that it's perfectly true that we are all experiencing a slightly different version of this reality. We just don't know. And so another question, you point at something and call it blue. And so I call it blue as well. But how do we know we're seeing the same color? We don't, and we can't. It would be almost impossible to prove it one way or the other. But it's a fascinating question. How do we know that we are perceiving, in fact, this reality exactly the same way? So all this to say, there was this idea at the time that, okay, so the particle of light is what is going into this uncertain state, right? And that we have just one reality, and this particle is somehow become in two places at the same time, right? But other physicists said, no, 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 that's not what's happening. What's happening is not that when you put an observer, suddenly the light starts to behave. No, what's happening is at the moment that the particle sees a choice, reality is splitting. The entirety of reality is splitting, including us. And we now exist in two versions of this reality. And so the particle goes through the barrier and it unites on the other side. Reality can now remerge back into one reality, and we're fine, right? And what we see is the end result of those dual realities merging back. We see the interference pattern. And so long as there's nothing that makes a permanent change, like reality splits and in one reality somebody dies, in the other reality they don't, okay, well, those realities cannot merge back, right? They're permanently split. So why is it that when you put a detector, why is it that when you observe, things suddenly collapse? Why do you collapse the waveform, the probability waveform, and suddenly there's only one choice being made? Because by observing, you are picking which reality you're going to live in, right? So you're perfectly fine to experience both realities so long as you're not directly involved. But the minute you're directly involved, the minute you observe, you have to be in one or the other. You can't be in both, right? And that's why it appears to collapse. It doesn't actually collapse. The probability wave is always there. It's not that it's collapsing. We're simply picking one reality over the other. And the one you choose, the one you end up in is kind of random, you know? So thinking about it from that perspective, every time you face a choice, your reality is going to split, and so will you, right? And you will only experience one of these outcomes because that's the reality that you have chosen. But there are other versions of you that have chosen the other options. And those other versions of you continue to live through those realities and all the choices that those lead to ad infinitum.
I hate this idea. I'm just kidding. No, I actually think it might be possible. I don't like it.
Oh, I know. No, it makes a lot of people very uncomfortable,
It's very uncomfortable.
and it leads to a lot of weird things like quantum immortality. If
Yeah.
this is true, if every choice that you're making, there's another version of you that walks along one of the other paths, then you can never die. Because in any moment when you might die, there's an alternate version in which you don't. You died of a heart attack. No, you didn't. You got hit by a car. No. You got shot. No. You didn't get shot fatally. I mean, there's a gazillion different options at any given moment of all the things that could happen. You got hit by the car. You got partially hit by the car. Oh, the car missed you by an inch. It missed you by a foot. You were never even on the corner. You know, there's an infinite variety of outcomes at any given moment. And so one of the questions that has come up about this theory of multi-world is, well, holy crap, that means that you could never die. You live forever. But we see people die all the time. Yeah, a version of them, but there's another version of them in a reality we're not living in that, the car missed them. I mean, it's you'll go to bed at night sort of going, if you think about this too much. But all this to say, we are essentially standing at any given moment. We're standing at a crossroads in which there are a gazillion different ways forward, and we're experiencing one, right? And our intuition can see the whole thing. That's essentially what my conclusion from all of this. The only way that intuition can be certain of which path is right is if it can see the spiderweb insanity of different options that lead out of every choice that you might make. It doesn't need to know the choices you will make. It simply needs to know all the choices that would be possible and all the ramifications of that in order to map out a path towards a destination. This is no different than Google Maps showing you the way to get from Schenectady to Los Angeles with all the varying options of roads it could take. So it's a route optimization algorithm, if you want to think of it that way. That's what your intuition is really good at. So the next question was, how is that possible? And that gets into multidimensional theory. So think of it this way. We live in a three-dimensional world. That's what we experience, right? Okay. We don't experience the fourth dimension because that dimension is time, and we only experience it one slice at a time, one moment at a time. If we were fourth dimensional beings, we would experience time very differently, right? But we're not. We're three-dimensional beings. So what would it be like to be a fourth dimensional being? What would we be able to do? What would we be able to see? Well, think of the difference between us in the third dimension and someone who lives in a two-dimensional world. So the example that I come up with, it's not perfect, but it's good enough, is a CAT scan. A CAT scan experiences the world in two dimensions, right? It only sees people and objects one slice at a time. And it cannot really understand that there's a whole person here. All it understands is, oh, I see a slice that includes these odd sort of circles that are actually your eyes, but it doesn't understand that they're circles. It doesn't understand that they're spheres. It understands only that there are these two circles. And there's all these other things. There's these little dots that are actually turn out to be veins, but it doesn't understand veins. It understands, oh, there's a dot, here. And it's kind of reddish or bluish. And it understands that. It can't understand a vein or an artery because that would require three-dimensional thinking, and it can't even conceive of that, right? So how does it experience a balloon, for example? I have a favorite video called Imagining the 10th Dimension that does a great job of this. It says a two-dimensional person would experience a balloon as a dot, and that dot would then become a circle. And that circle would then expand up to a maximum point, and then it would shrink down, become a dot, and it would be gone, right? That's how it would experience a balloon. And in a similar way, it experiences us as slice of soles of feet, and then that becomes this sort of round thing, which is our ankles, and it goes up our legs, and then it goes past our head, and we're gone, right? That's how it experiences us. If I told a CAT scan that I could hang on to my feet and touch my head at the same time, I would blow its tiny mind. It would have no idea how I could do that. It would be like, but you can't do that. No one can do that. It's impossible. Okay, well, so we're three-dimensional beings, right? A fourth dimensional being would see us as the aggregation of every moment of our lives, right? Where a CAT scan sees us as slices of a body, we experience ourselves as slices of time, right? So if you line up all of the slices of time, you would form a corpus that would essentially be us in the fourth dimension. We'd be like an undulating sausage that starts with a baby and ends up with an old person, and you're gone, right?
So cool.
So a fourth dimensional person would be able to put their finger in our lives at 5 years old and 55 years old at the same time and say, I exist in your life at two moments at the same moment. And be like, but that's impossible. Like, no, because it's all the same moment. It's all like what you call time is not really a thing. It's just it's a collection of moments, and we'd be like, what are you saying? I can't even imagine what you're talking about. So a fourth dimensional person would see everything that was going to happen to us from birth to death on one timeline, right? But multi-world theory says, no, there are multiple timelines, and they're spreading out all over the place. There's width to this. There isn't just length, there's width. One dimension, two dimensions, right? Like somebody who understands one line of a table versus somebody who sees the surface of the table, right? So what is that? That's 5 dimensions. If you understand 5 dimensions, then you're going down the path of this timeline, not with blinkers on. You're going down the path of the timeline, seeing all the different off-ramps and realizing you could move down those off-ramps. What you don't have is a map. Because to have a map, you'd have to rise up off the surface of the timelines and be able to see the whole thing, right? And that is another dimension. That's the 6th dimension, right? So how does your intuition do what it does? The only explanation, the only scientific explanation would be that your intuition is tapped into a 6th dimensional view of the world and it can see the entire map. Now, we say intuition, but in reality, let's just call it your higher self. People seem to like that term. So whatever version of you this is, I could easily say, look, this is an untapped ability of your mind, that when you're born into this world, you can actually perceive reality the way it actually is, but you spend your first few years as a baby just trying to align yourself with the other people you gotta work with, you know. Your parents don't see it, no one else sees it. So, you know, maybe you should ignore these other things that you can see and just focus on the reality that they're living. You know, I think a lot of what happens to us as kids is we're trying to realign ourselves with the reality that we're supposed to be in. And there's a whole other topic in there. But all this to say, whether it's a hidden ability, a perceptual ability of your brain that we have consciously blocked off from ourselves, or whether you choose to believe that there's a higher self that is aware of the map and sees all the different avatars walking all the different reality paths, and it's trying to communicate to you desperately through intuition because it's the only communication mechanism it has. That, at least for me, would explain how intuition's working. But now, sticking with the higher self analogy, how does the higher self decide where it's going to take you? I mean, it's telling you through intuition where to go, but where does it think it's taking you? You know, I've got this awesome Uber driver, but is he picking and choosing for himself? And what I've realized is no, we're setting the destination. We decide. Your intuition has no vested interest. Remember force of nature? It doesn't care where it takes you. It really doesn't. Why doesn't it? Why doesn't it have any compassion for you? Because it's a video game to this thing. This thing is watching every version of you going across every possible path, every possible timeline, and you know, it's like television, and one version of you dies. That's okay. There's a few billion more. This guy got gored by a tiger, or you know, by an elephant, or this guy became a serial killer. Oh, that's too bad. That was a bad show. I won't watch that anymore. You know, it's just it doesn't care because none of it has any consequence. To it, it's just, oh yeah, well, I'll just go back on the path and re-experience that, and you know, it really doesn't matter. So the things that we're suffering through, it's not feeling that. You know, the things that the joy that we have and the horror and the terrible things, it doesn't, none of that matters to it. It's very happy to guide you down whatever path you would like to go on. It doesn't matter whether that path leads to good things or bad things, because to your higher self, there is no such thing as good or bad. There's just, well, there's this path and there's that path. On this path, you'll experience this. On that path, you'll experience that. Both valid experiences, both educational experiences. So the goal is to tell your higher self where you want to go. It's happy to listen. It's happy to take you there. But you know, we are, to put it mildly, we are a chaotic jumble of messaging. Most of the time, we don't know what we want. We're very confused by what we want. And there are the things that we would like, And there's the things that we think we deserve. There's the things that we think are going to happen whether we like it or not. You know, your fear has a lot to do with what you want for yourself, because we have a tendency to not want the things that we don't think we're able to get. Okay, well, who tells us that we're able to get it or not? It's usually your fear. No, you're not good enough for that. No, you don't deserve that. Nah, you know, if you go for that, you're just going to fail. Don't even bother. Nah, it's crazy, that thing that you want. No one, I mean, come on, you're not Beyonce, you know. There's all these voices in your head that are trying to hold you back from wanting the things that you want because it's stupid, you know, or whatever your voice is telling you. So, you know, your higher self is waiting to hear what you really, where you really, really, really want to go, right? Most people talk about what they wish would happen, what they hope will happen, and what they're afraid will happen. And here's the thing about that. Wishing and hoping are not very strong signals, right? Because wishing and hoping inherently acknowledge that that it's not very likely. You know, I wish this would happen says, I don't think it will. I wish it would, but I don't think it will. I hope this will happen. It'd be nice. You know, what level of conviction is there in a wish or a hope? 60%, 80%, maybe if you're on a good day. You know, sometimes it might reach 100%, and then you go, oh yeah, sorry, I had a moment where I went crazy, you know. The people who believe in things to 100%, you know, are often criticized for being so sure of themselves. So we're taught not to do that. Here's the thing. Fear never has any doubt. Fear is 1,000% sure, 1,000,000% sure that bad stuff's going to happen. You know, it suffers no doubt whatsoever. And so if your higher self is waiting to hear what you want, what kind of signal is it getting from you? Well, it's getting a really clear signal from fear. And it's getting a kind of a wishy-washy signal from, you know, hope and wishing and all those things. So why do bad things happen to good people? Why do people end up in relationships that are abusive and then abusive again and then abusive again? Because that's what they're afraid is going to happen. They wish it would be different. They hope it will be different next time. They might even get really angry and say, I will not let this happen again. But until that anger, until that indignation becomes not indignation and outrage, but becomes absolute certitude, it's probably going to keep happening. You know, now we would say, well, you see, this is it. They have to finally learn to stand up for themselves. They have to finally learn to say no. And yeah, okay. But what are we really talking about? We're talking about somebody who has 100% conviction this is not going to goddamn happen again. And they will move heaven and earth to make sure that it doesn't. And if you say to them, what's the likelihood that the next guy will abuse you? They would say 0, you know, and they'll be firm about it, right? And that is conviction, right? That is the same conviction that fear has. You know, and those people have stopped being afraid that the next person will be an abuser because they've bought a gun or they've done whatever it is. They've showed some sign that they simply will not accept that as their path. You know, and that's what's needed. You know, why do good things happen to bad people? Because some people, even though they're pricks, are 1,000,000% certain that they're going to succeed. Like they have 0 doubt that they will succeed. And consequently, awesome things keep coming to them. You're like, damn it, he doesn't deserve that. Yeah, but he's absolutely certain and his life is taking him where he wants to go. He might be a prick, but that has nothing to do with it. You know, that outrage comes from the belief that God would never let such a thing happen. And God has nothing to do with this. And, you know, if even the people who, you know, believe in a divine being would have to concede that free will means that he's not going to intercede, is he? He can't. Otherwise, he's broken his own rule, right? So you got to kind of let go of the idea that this is all about, good people and bad people. It's not. This is all about, you deciding for yourself what it is that you finally want to have happen in your life, no matter how crazy it might seem, no matter how nuts it might seem, no matter how scary it might be. But you have to be 100%, 1000% certain. So how do you become 1000% certain? Well, if you're religious, it means that you pray. And if you're truly religious, then you believe that if you pray, God will absolutely do this for you, right? If you pray and you have doubt, it ain't going to work. It is not going to work, which is why so many people have such doubt in whether prayer actually works or not, because they pray and it doesn't happen. Well, because you don't fundamentally believe. You don't have the level of conviction that a born again Christian has. It's just not the same. Some people use visualization. That works great. Vision boards, but you have to get to the point where you're living that reality, where that reality is so real to you that it's as though you've done some time travel, you've gone into the future, you've seen it yourself, and you've come back, and you have that level of conviction that it's going to happen. If you do a vision board because you're basically full of hopes and wishes, but you don't really commit to it, then you're going to have less success, because life is going to be a little wishy-washy. You're still going to be afraid, and so what is it you want exactly? And keep in mind, it doesn't care. It's a force of nature.
Do you think you mentioned there's this, the higher self, using that term for a second, that it can see the whole picture, and then you need to communicate what you want to that higher self so that you can get what you want.
Absolutely.
Do you think there's an opposite feedback loop where you can actually ask the higher self, what would be best for me, and then have it choose for you the correct next step?
Yeah, and I've already done that with a few people. Usually usually the question is, imagine yourself at the peak of your happiness, at the peak of your power, the peak of your success, whatever. It depends on where they are, what stage in their lives they're at. If they're 20 or 30, then you're talking about the peak of your success. But if they're older, then it's usually the peak of their happiness. Because they're potentially past the point where they're running after success. Either way, you're talking about, what is my best reality that would make me the happiest, where I would feel really good about myself. And if you're really in tune with your intuition, you can actually look forward. And so there's this exercise that I'll put people through, where I'll ask them a bunch of questions. And I know, I've done this with you.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I believe I've done this with you.
I don't think so.
Have I? Oh my God. Then I apologize. I should do this with you.
Okay.
So you put somebody through a series of questions in which you cast them forward. And you say, this is not an exercise in logic. This is not an exercise in trying to work out, what's possible. If you do that, you're limiting yourself. So turn all that crap off. And just, tap into your intuition and talk to me about what feels right. And we'll talk about, I never ask somebody what career they have, because that's a very limiting question. I much prefer to say, talk to me about the climate where you live, right? Just imagine yourself in your future life really happy. What's the weather like? You start with that. Why that? Because it's a very distracting question. They're no longer, you can't possibly think of, well, how will I get there if you're talking about the weather? So you talk about the weather, you talk about, okay, imagine that you're home. Are you in a house? Are you in an apartment? How many bedrooms are there? What are the floors like? What does the place smell like? What do you see out the window? Are you close to mountains? Are you in a forest? Are you close to the ocean? You start to get them to visualize a little bit of what the ambiance is like where they live. And as they start to get into that world, you can start asking questions like, okay, are there any animals around? You know, do you have pets? Is there a partner in the house? Are there kids? And you know, and then it becomes okay, so where does your money come from? Does it come from something you're doing, or does it come from something you've already done? You know, and then you start to talk about the type of work that they do. Are you helping people? Are you making something? You know, again, I don't care what the profession is. I care about the feeling of their life. You know, and the world starts to become really concrete to them, particularly when you stop trying to nail it down. Because ultimately, when somebody said, "Oh yeah, but you know, let's talk about the career I'm going to have." No, 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 let's not. I don't need to care about what country you're in. I don't need to care about any of that, because the more specific you try and become, the more difficult you're making it for life to get you there. Right? This is kind of like saying to an Uber driver, I want to get to the airport, but don't take any highways and take this boulevard, which goes in the opposite direction. Uh, you know, it would make no sense to put those kinds of restrictions. You're just making it harder. You're making it take longer, right? If you really want to get there fast, then let life work out the details. Because does it really matter what country you're in if you have this climate and this beautiful place and these people around you, if you're happy? Does it really matter what the profession is if it's creative and it's, you know, if it satisfies all the aspects of what you're looking for? Do you really care what the title is? No. Do you care how much money you're making if you can afford this lifestyle? No. You know, generally the answer to those questions is no. So stop focusing on what doesn't matter. You know, focus on what does. Um, so, you know, visualization or conviction is how we communicate with it, and intuition is how it communicates with us, and that's sort of the loop. Um, and it's really just about having some idea of where you want to go, and you could arbitrarily decide. I find it much more interesting to put people through that exercise and have them think about where they are meant to end up, where what would make them happiest. Because people have a tendency logically to think of things that'll make them happy that won't. I want money. I want success. I want this. I want that. And then they get it and they're not happy because they're not really tapping into what would be good for them. They're logically thinking through what they probably need, which is not the right way to go about this.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sorry.
No, thanks. That's great.
I feel like we've been on a bit of a wild ride. I apologize.
Oh, no. Thank you.
Is there something I haven't talked about? Because I can't even keep track of everything I've said.
Did you have any questions, Karen?
Well, actually, I did have one. I think maybe I just want to make sure I didn't mishear what you said. But just did you say something to the effect that imagination is how we communicate with our intuition, with our higher self, something along those lines?
Yeah, kind of. It's conviction, right?
Conviction.
It's conviction. If you want to communicate with your higher self about where you want to go, conviction is the way to do it. You can imagine all you want, but if you don't believe in what you're imagining, then it doesn't matter. I
Okay.
think imagination is great, but imagination implies that you're thinking of something that's not even possible.
Mm,
You know, that you're imagining a fantasy.
mhm,
Um, what I'm asking for is that people tap into their intuition and sort of cast themselves forward along their path. You know, it's something that will happen automatically. You don't have to think about it, to be honest. Um, it's something that people are remarkably good at doing as soon as they stop trying to do it, you know? Um, you know, a lot of people will tell me, I can't sing.
mhm,
And what I will universally tell them, yes, you can. You did as a kid. Most kids can open their mouths and sing beautifully. At different levels, but you rarely run into a kid who just can't sing at all.
mhm,
And the reason that kids can sing so easily is because they don't know that they can't.
mhm,
It's as we get older and our voices change that we're like, oh, oh, I'm embarrassed by my voice and now I can't sing. And I suddenly become really interested in various musicians and rock stars and I see that they're straining to sing and the muscles are bulging and any singing instructor will tell you that the secret to singing is to relax. That most singers, if they hit a false note, part of it is ear training to be able to recognize when you're hitting a note and when you're not. But again, as a kid, you knew. Um, but the majority of it is to stop your muscles from taking over. Like my singing instructors would have me lie down, put my head between my legs. They would suspend me from the ceiling if they could, get you to sing in a foreign language that you can't speak.
Right.
Why? Because the minute that you invert gravity, your muscles don't know what to do. Suddenly the pull on them is different. And now while they're scrambling to try and figure out how are we supposed to behave in this situation, your voice can finally come through without interference.
Mhm.
Or if you're speaking in a foreign language, if you're singing in a foreign language, then suddenly your muscles can't kick in with all the things it does when you form words that they know very well. So most of the time it's about relax, just open your throat, open your chest, and and sing from down here, you know.
Mhm.
Your vocal cords, they just vibrate at different frequencies, right?
Mhm.
Which means a high note is not actually high, and a low note is not actually low.
Mhm.
It's a phenomenon in our heads that makes us think that a high note, I got to go all the way up here to get to this high note. No. They used to tell me, if you want to sing a low note, think it's high. Think of it as up here. And if you want to sing a high note really well, think of it as down there. Or think of low notes as here and high notes as out there. But don't think of them as high and low because that's wrong. It's the same air that has to pass through your throat, and it's just a different frequency in your vocal cords. They vibrate at a slightly faster, slightly slower. That's it. But we make it complicated because our brains get in the way
Thank you.
and we imagine that it's a struggle. I gotta, and your muscles kick in, and now of course you can't sing because your muscles are strangling you. That's why when you see opera singers, they look so relaxed. Their voices, their mouths open, and everything's just happening with their mouths open. Their jaws don't move. Yeah, because they are completely relaxed. Their muscles are not engaged in anything that they're doing.
Right.
And they sing beautifully. Um, in a similar way, we are our own worst enemy. We get in our own way. It is not hard to catch yourself forward into your future and see what it is that you're headed for
Mhm.
if you want to, if that's where you want to go. But we tend to think, well, A, that's impossible, so of course I can't do that. But yeah, you can. You can. There are simple exercises to do it. It's actually not even training. It's just, it's not hard. I
That's
know it
very
sounds crazy, but you know.
well, something I could try.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to do an exercise with you
Yeah.
if you want.
Yeah, well, not now. I'm not that confident.
It honestly, we could do it standing at a bus stop. It's not something that you need like incense and lotus flowers to do. You can do it anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean that's very cool.
Next
Um,
time we talk.
yeah. Did you
So
have any questions or?
yeah, I wanted to touch a bit on this idea of like programming your higher self or whatever you want to call it, because or why bad things happen to good people and vice versa.
Mhm.
I don't know if you know David Hawkins. Have you ever heard of him? But he has this idea of this sort of scale of consciousness as
Mhm.
your lower self or yeah, it's maybe not your lower self, but the true you sort of progresses
Mhm.
up this scale of consciousness, this level of awareness.
Mhm.
And when you're in a lower state, you're actually kind of like vibrating at a certain frequency or matching a certain emotional state or a being state. And an example might be the state of fear or anger or something. And that person, when they're in that state, will bring about circumstances in relation to that state that they're vibrating at. And so
Mhm.
that's the way he sees it is the reason bad things keep happening to people is because they have these beliefs and this being state that actually attracts all of those similar patterns to it. And it's not until you actually let go of that being state and move up to a higher state that then you can attract better and better things.
I never thought of it as moving up to a higher state. I always thought of it as getting rid of baggage.
Yeah, and that's another way of putting it for sure. But
So
there does seem to be a transformation of the actual essence of a person as well, that occurs more than.
here's what I would say.
Yeah.
Yes, the more you think you have no control over your life, the more you will be victimized by your life, the more your fear will direct you. This is really what this is about. We talk about detachment, right? That comes up a lot. The only thing you're detaching from are the things that fuel your fear. So, you have possessions. Why do you have possessions? Well, you have possessions because you're afraid of having nothing, or you're afraid of not being successful. So you have to have possessions to prove that you're successful. Um, there's a lot of attachment to social status or other people's opinions of us. And so long as we're thinking of those things all the time, so long as those are our focus, then our fear has got a lot of control over us at that point. Because one of the things that drives us a lot is what's called loss aversion. So we're afraid of losing things. We're afraid of losing our relationships. We're afraid of losing our home. We're afraid of losing our money. We're afraid of losing status. We're afraid of losing people's good opinion. Loss, 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 loss. And we're terrible at loss. It's just absolutely terrifies us a lot of the time. Um, part of what you end up learning to do as as you go down your path and you start following your path more, is that you realize that loss is actually a necessary part of growth. There's basically at any given moment, as you walk down your path, one of two things is happening. Either you are gaining things or you're losing things, right? Life is either giving you things or it's taking things from you. When it's giving you things, everything's awesome. You've got new friendships, you've got more money, you've got, new opportunities, it's all good stuff. And all the things that you're gaining are things that you're going to need for some future part of your path that hasn't come yet, right? May come next, or you may have accumulated somebody in your life that won't be relevant to you for 20 years. You don't know. But you know that life is bringing you things, and you need to accept those things in your life because they will probably be necessary later. But the very next phase of your life, the very next turn that your life asks you to make, may become rather painful. Usually it's painful because we're having something taken from us, right? Either a person leaves our life, it could be a relationship ends or a friendship disintegrates, but it could be somebody dies. It could be that we lose our job. It could be that some other bad thing happens to us. The same things that are being given to us, those same things, slightly different things may need to be taken from us. Why? Because those things, as much as we cherish them, as much as they matter to us, may become the thing that's going to stop us from moving forward in the next phase of our life, right? In the next chapter that we have to pursue. And most of the time, I would argue, the most painful experiences tend to come when the thing you have to get rid of is a belief. Mm. There is something that you believe to be true that is not true. And until you let go of it, until you're willing to broaden your perspective or until you're willing to let go of that fear, you can't move forward. There could be somebody in your life that's toxic, could be a family member. And that's really tough, but until you let them go, you can't move forward because they will hold you back, right? It could be that they simply feed your fear, or it's an opinion that you've held in supremacy in your life for far too long, and it's time for you to let go of that person and not let their opinion of you continue to dominate what you're going to do. So when people say, oh, well, this means if you walk your path, everything's going to be easy. No, no. Your path will take you to your destination very, very quickly. And it'll be shocking at how quickly certain impossible things will suddenly become possible. At the same time, you're going to go through things that are going to be painful to you. You're going to be asked to make choices that are going to be painful. But that's part of the process. So I've come to understand that whether I'm going through something that's really joyful or whether I'm going through something that's very painful, I accept it as part of the path that I'm on. And I would rather stay on the path and get through it, because I know I will come out the other side much better, rather than try and find an alternate path around that, which will still require me to get rid of that thing eventually. It's if that thing that I need to drop is really an obstacle, it will continue to be an obstacle. I'm just looking for a path that's easier, but it's not more effective. And it's not like I'm going to avoid the painful procedure. It's just going to come at me a different way. Maybe I'll delay it. I'd rather face it now. So a lot of the path is about letting go of things. You gain a lot, but you're also expected to lose certain things. And it's the loss of those things that brings you to what you call a higher level. I would say it just brings you clarity.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is it's just a greater and lesser and greater states of delusion.
Yeah, you could put it that way. I think of it as I am much more relaxed than I have ever been. The more uncertain, my life can become quite uncertain. It's one of the things that you have to deal with as you do this, is that there's a lot less certainty in living your life this way, because you can't predict anything. You have no idea where your path is going. You really have no idea. And you might be able to predict what the next stage might be. And I kind of turn that into a bit of a game. I kind of like to see where things seem to be trending and go, oh, I suspect the next thing is going to be this. And then we see if that's true. But you never really know. And I find it actually makes me spend more time enjoying what I'm doing right now. I don't worry as much about what's coming next, because what's coming next is going to come on its own. I don't worry when it's going to come. I don't get anxious about, oh, but how come this hasn't happened yet? It'll happen. And more, I start to be able to anticipate what's going to happen. Like last year, I knew exactly what was going to happen this year by the end of this year. And everything so far this year has gone exactly the way that I predicted it would. We're not at the end of the year yet. We're still 3 months out. There are certain final things that should happen, that I suspect will happen, because they're trending exactly that way. But I could not tell you last year how I knew. I would simply say it's what my intuition is telling me is about to happen. So you start to be able to, if you want to, you start to be able to see further down the road, and that makes you feel a little more secure, I suppose. But at the same time, the main lesson is just to stop getting stressed about things. You lose your job, it's because there's another job that's lining up for you. Don't worry about it. Stressing over it is absolutely not going to change a thing. Does that mean I can just sit at home on the couch and eat popcorn and watch movies? No, of course you have to be out there. You got to be applying for jobs. But I will tell you, I have almost never gotten a job that I've applied to. I mean, I've made thousands of applications over my career. Almost never. My jobs come to me through chance encounters. Somebody reaches out to me, as a surprise. or someone talks about me and that gets me a job. It's almost never come from an application, which is a little weird, but it's kind of like saying, I want to go downtown. Okay, but I'm just going to sit in my living room. No, you got to actually go to the bus stop. The bus will come and get you if you're patient, but if you don't get your ass to the bus stop, nothing's going to happen. So it's a little bit of, you got to collaborate with your life. Yes, it will absolutely bring you everything you need, but you've got to be collaborative. You can't be stubborn, you know. And I have tried that. I have tried to put obstacles in my path when my life has said, thou shalt do this. This is absolutely the thing that you need to do. And I've stubbornly went, no, I will not. If you want me to do that, you will have to get rid of this obstacle, and I will do nothing to help you. And sure enough, obstacle's gone. Like, God damn it. All right, then I will put this obstacle on my path, and gone. It's like, I've openly challenged this way of living. I've stubbornly sometimes refused, and my life has gone, yeah, no, you don't have a choice. You are going to do this one way or the other. So you learn to accept. But sorry, I digress. All this to say, this evolution is really an evolution of letting go of anxiety, letting go of fear, letting go of the belief that this is going to be difficult. Having the belief to commit to the next step because it's right. It's not having a belief in God, although I suppose that is very helpful for some people. But for me, it's more of a conviction that I know what the next move is going to be. I know that it's the right thing. How do I know? Because my intuition tells me. And I think this aligns very nicely with religion. Religion would say, oh, it's God that's guiding you. It's Jesus that's guiding you. Okay, yeah, you can believe that if you want. That works perfectly well. Ultimately, this isn't about the metaphor itself. It's whatever metaphor works for you. Awesome. If conviction is created because you have strong religious beliefs, then by God, go for it. If religion doesn't work for you, there are other things that can, but it's one way or the other. Just get some conviction and stop stressing so much. For those who think that they need to have control, okay, it's a different kind of control.
Yeah.
You have control over the destination, and then you got to trust the Uber driver to take you. You can't get behind the wheel because you don't know how to drive. You're a terrible driver.
Thank you.
Yes,
You're
thank
welcome.
you.
I don't know if that answers your question, though. Did that answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Yes? Okay, good. I can never tell. I just
I guess it's up to say whether but you answered mine.
Okay,
Close
good.
enough. No, I think we should probably wrap it up for this one, eh? And just
Yeah,
like kind
thank
of
you so
not
much. I mean,
go for
we'd
too
love
long,
to
but
have you back at some point.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think that'd
sure.
be really cool.
I'm
Great.
always available. Whatever you want to talk about.
Thank
I mean,
you.
Ohm and I talk all the time, so he can give you long discussions about the things that he and I talk about.
Yes,
Oh,
I've
I have
told her a
questions
bit.
for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, can I get a link to this when you guys put it out?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll probably send it to you. I will send it to you before I put it out, and you can if you want anything taken.
Oh no, I trust you.
Okay.
No, don't worry about it. I don't need to approve it. Whatever,
Okay.
however you want to splice it and dice it. And
He's trying to surrender to life.
There we go.
no, I look, I absolutely don't worry about those things anymore.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So however you put me out there, you'll put me out there that way, and that's it. I mean, I published a book this spring. I still have never actually went on to Amazon to see how it's been selling. I don't care.
I'll probably go find it now.
Yeah.
Do
You
you
have a
have a
book on
copy?
Amazon? What's the name of it?
It's called The Intuitive Way, but it's easier for you to find it if you just type in my name.
Okay.
I,
Well, I'll have a cover for it I'll show people it at this point.
all right, whatever you would like. I got a review from a friend of mine who read it. Let me read this to you because it's hilarious. He's very much sort of a science and math guy. He builds apps for financial literacy. Just to give you an idea. Um, and so when he found out that I'd written a book, he ordered a copy, and he's been reading it. And then he sent me his opinion recently. So here's what he says. He says, I'm about a third into it. Your writing style is very pragmatic, no fluff, but also not, too much sort of on the nose, meaning I'm not sort of shoving things down your throat. This is satisfying from the point of view of someone seeking answers in their life. Your cover art is so new agey that it would have been an instant turnoff at the bookstore. It's quite harmonious with the subject matter, though. Thank you for not having added flying dolphins and unicorns to it. For myself, I did find it insightful to a certain degree, and I laughed out loud when you say the people who come to you are delivered a variant of this book's advice. When I finish it, and I will, I'll make a mental note of giving your book to the next person I encounter who I feel needs your advice. This book isn't meant to be stashed in a bookshelf. And then that new person will look at the cover and ask me, really? And I'll tell them with confidence, trust me, dude. I know the person who wrote it. It's worth it. I feel that's the path meant for every copy of this book. And
Cool.
what's interesting about that is that another friend of mine in Edmonton has been reading it, and he got about 4 chapters in out of 10 and was already telling me, my God, it's made such a difference. And he immediately said, I want to take this, I want to buy multiple copies of the book, and I want to leave one under a tree in every park in the city. And I want to put one on coffee tables in coffee shops, because then random people will encounter it. And he says,
Nice. That's awesome.
I think it could do a lot of good. And I'm like, my God, he's Johnny Appleseeding my book. It's,
That's great.
it's been weird, Um, but I wrote it because I felt compelled to do it. It wasn't, it was my intuition that said, now's the time, you have to do it now, 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 now. And it took only a month, which
Wow.
is, well, it shows how ready it was.
Yeah.
That's
It was
cool.
really ready to be written. And now my second book is starting to kind of tap me on the shoulder and go, okay, it's time. You got to
Okay.
write this now.
What
So
what are you gonna write about next?
trauma, trauma.
Mm.
And in much the same way, because here's the thing, and I'm sorry, I'm dragging this out, and I don't mean to. Um, my self-esteem was shattered, right? I mean, I never managed to have any. So it's not like I had some and some traumatic thing happened and it was gone. I mean, my self-esteem was being obliterated from age 4, you know. Um, so how do you rebuild self-esteem? Well, the thing that I've learned from helping other people is that you can only rebuild self-esteem with a series of small successes that build on each other, and you get a little bit of success, a little bit more success, a little bit more success, and you start to believe that you're capable of success. And and you start to see yourself differently, and that's how you rebuild, right? But if you have no self-esteem, how do you achieve success when success requires self-esteem? It's a catch-22. It's a vicious circle. You can't get success because you don't have self-esteem. You can't get self-esteem because you don't have any success. So what I discovered in pursuing this way of living, which I only realized some people call Taoism, although Taoism doesn't allow you to set your destination. It
Mhm.
it simply talks about aligning yourself with the energy of your life and flowing with it, and that's it. It stops there, right? I couldn't stop there. Um, but what I found was, all right, I don't need self-esteem to be successful. I just need to get onto my path and follow it, and I will have success. And that will build my self-esteem, which will lead to more success. And so I can correct this through the application of this way of thinking. Um, in reality, if you really want to do it rapidly, then You need somebody around you who really believes in you. It's the whole unconditional love and acceptance and support. You need somebody like that. Um, and that really supercharges and accelerates that whole experience.
Mm.
Uh, and that's been a lot of what I found in my coaching and a lot of what I do now. Life's brought me a lot of people over the last year that are fundamentally broken. And I found you can do great things just by providing them the love and acceptance and support that they've never had.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's crazy
totally agree.
the change that you can have in someone, or the change that they will make in themselves the
Yeah.
minute they have that, the minute that they are assured that they have that.
Yeah, talking about conviction, the one conviction I've found that has changed my life dramatically is just the conviction to see every single person and situation as divine. Not
Sure.
like like what they're doing or whatever, but just looking past all of that to the core of the person as this spark of goodness, and
Yeah.
just seeing them as that and believing that they're going to become that, and
Well,
they
because
do.
everyone that's doing horrible things is somebody who's just horribly broken.
Yeah.
It's not because they're evil people. They're just in a lot of pain. And that pain may have solidified like magma,
Yep.
it may have become something really concrete. That doesn't mean you can't break them out of it. But it requires a lot of patience and conviction, and you got to be in it for the long haul. So, the people that I am helping, um, I stay with it for as long as they want to stay with it. I'm not going anywhere. And someone said, "Isn't it exhausting?" I said, "No, no. We have an infinite supply of love and acceptance and support. It costs nothing, really. Um, and when you see the difference it makes to people, it's a nice sort of way to recharge, you know. Um, but again, it's more possible when you have stopped caring about what other people think, or when you've been able to let go of those things. Because then even if the person behaves badly, even if the person decides to try and be abusive, well, abuse is a something that two people have to be involved in, right? The abuser and the victim. Um, so if somebody tries to abuse me and I won't participate, then they're just yelling into the void. Okay. If you need to do it, yeah, go ahead. Whatever you need to do. But it's not going to touch me, so I don't care.
Well,
And I'll still be there,
I
you know.
can't wait to read your book.
I'd be interested to see what you think. Let me know. I mean, we've kind of touched on a lot of it. We haven't really gone into the various types of fear and where, but we'll see what you pull out of it.